So Bernie Sanders, I'm going back to some of his filibuster. I got a couple of more bites here. Mike, numerals 2526. So Bernie Sanders, we borrow what? $1 billion to pay for the tax cuts, right? So I learned from Bernie Sanders, we borrow money from the Chi-Coms for millionaires and billionaires. But when we spend on porculus and unemployment and TARP, everything else, what do? We borrow that from Japan? I mean, they are number two. So what are we to believe here? The Chi-Coms are paying for these so-called tax cuts for the rich. Here, Bernie's still on his roll. We have two more bites. Here's the first one.
Mr. President, when we look at the context in which this agreement was reached, we have got to see that it takes place at a time when the rich are already doing phenomenally well, while we have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Top 400 wealthiest people in this country earn $345 million a year, and they pay an effective tax rate of 16.6%. They do not need an extension of tax breaks. And by the way, for the United States of America, this effective tax rate of 16.6% on average is the lowest tax rate for the very rich in America that has ever been.
Okay. Unfortunately, I feel the need to respond to this. When we look at the context in which the agreement was reached, we have got to see that it takes place at a time when the rich are already doing phenomenally well. While we have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, the top 400 wealthiest people in this country earn $345 million a year. And they pay an effective tax rate of 16.6%. Now, the top 400 wealthiest people in the world are not who we're really talking about here with these tax breaks. The top 400 wealthiest, I mean, every damn one of them is going to be a billionaire or damn close. We're talking about small business people, 250,000, 500,000, 750,000. These are the people that employ other people. And they are not paying a tax rate of 16.6%. To pay an effective tax rate of 16.6%, you're paying tax on dividends, not income. There is no way. People at 36%, trust me on this, there is no way people paying 36% are paying an effective rate of 16. And by the way, the effective rate definition is a little misleading itself, and Bernie Sanders knows this. But also, he says the 400 wealthiest people in this country earn. They earn. Are they stealing it from the rich or from the poor? Let me ask the question this way. Who is more evil? Who is more greedy here? Those millionaires and the billionaires or the federal government? The government steals much more than the private sector. The government is much more corrupt than the private sector. The government is more in debt than the private sector. The government is more irresponsible with money than the private sector. The private sector is not trying to pick our pockets at every turn, even when we die. It isn't trying to take control of our lives. The private sector is doing none of the evil the government is doing. The real greed in this country is in Washington and in every one of the 50 state capitals. 57 if you live in Obama world. The government takes people's earnings multiple times. You choose who in the private sector is going to get a portion of what you earn. The private sector can't take one dime from you. You have to voluntarily spend it with them. Now, Mr. Sanders railing here about, it's horrible. These rich people earning $345 million, they don't need a tax break. He doesn't have the slightest idea what these people do with their $345 million that they've earned. He has no clue what they do with it. Obviously he doesn't, or he wouldn't characterize them the way he does. Here's the next bite. This one's even worse.
The top 25 hedge fund managers last year made a combined $25 billion in income, a combined $1 billion per person. Okay? So if you are a hedge fund manager, you're doing pretty good. And I mentioned a moment ago, we tried just the other day to get checks of $250 out for disabled vets and senior citizens on Social Security who haven't had a COLA in 2 years, couldn't get them that check. But the top 25 hedge fund managers last year made a combined $25 billion in income, $1 billion per person. And our Republican friends say, oh, my word, we've got to lower their taxes.
No, you know what we do, Bernie? We say take the account that you can't afford to pay to veterans and give it to the hedge fund managers and let it really grow. Bernie, what's obvious here with your own statistic is the government cannot meet its responsibilities. The government can't meet its promises. Not every hedge fund manager makes $1 billion a year. There are far more than 25 of them. There are top earners in every profession. And there are people at the bottom of earnings in every profession. So these top 25 guys earn $1 billion per person. So it's legit. It's how they do business. They do business with people who sign up to do business with them that way. You can't afford your COLA to Social Security or the disabled vets because you haven't managed the government's money. The government doesn't have any. The government is in debt. It's not because of the hedge fund guys. I would tell you the taxes they are paying dwarf whatever it's going to cost you to give your $250 billion away. And why is there no COLA, Bernie? Inflation's going up. You want to know why there's no cost of living adjustment? Because Obama doesn't want there to appear to be any inflation. So the way you guys, the way you snakes are going around this is to say, well, there's no inflation. It's unfair. Cost of living adjustment increase. They're not going out to Social Security people and veterans. So we want to cut them a check for $200. No. The deal is that if there's no inflation, they don't get an increase. That's the deal, Bernie. That's the law. All of a sudden now, even though there's inflation, you guys say there isn't any because you're trying to put forth this notion, this myth of an economic recovery for the sacred of your president. Peace be upon him. And all of a sudden, you now want to come up with the money anyway. So you got to write checks going against the deal. The deal is they don't get anything. There's no inflation. You say there's no inflation. And we all know there is, and you do too. So that's why you're trying to come up with the additional $250. What is evident by virtue of his own reasoning here is that his outfit's not responsible. His outfit can't meet its pledges, can't make their commitments, can't make their promises, can't fulfill anything that they promised people. Bernie, you're bankrupt. The institution you represent, the beloved institution that you champion, is bankrupt. You're having to borrow money from the Chi-Coms to survive. The hedge fund guys are earning theirs. There may be some Chi-Coms investing, but the Chi-Coms aren't loaning it to them, and they're not giving it to them. Classic example of free market doing great. The lesson here is, why don't you try to emulate all these people doing so well? Why don't you take the way they're earning money and try to incorporate some of their theories into the way the government operates with its money? No, you can't, Bernie, because that's not your intent. And you don't have the knowledge to do it anyway. The richest entity by far in this country is your government, Bernie. You ought to hate your government. You ought to despise your government. Why, look at all the unfair tax breaks your government gets. You tax people 7 times. You tax people every time they exchange a dollar. Look at all of the ill-gotten wealth that your government has, and you are still broke. You ought to hate your government. Look at how rich you guys are. Look at the health care bill that you guys just passed. One hand, you should be happy that you were able to pull that off. No, you're miserable. It's all because you're just jealous. You wish you had $1 billion a year. But you haven't the foggiest notion how to make more than what you're already making, $175,000 or whatever your Senate salary is, which is, I can tell you, you're not even worth that. As far as your employees are concerned, us. All around you, people, all around you are the lessons to learn how to be solvent, how to be profitable. What do? You take the biggest pile of money that exists in this world every year, and you mismanage it. And you have taken this country into bankruptcy. And you dare go on the floor of the House and complain and blame it on working people earning what they have, regardless of the amount. You blame them. You take the taxes they pay away from what you have, and you see what you're left with. Because you're headed that way anyway. You're getting to the point, Bernie, where all your taxation is going to force these people out of the country or going to force them to retire and live off what they've got. So, hell, it's not going to be worth dealing with you, Bernie. It's getting to the point where the citizens of this country don't consider their own government their friend. The people of this country are starting to consider their own government the enemy. Going to get on an airplane, starting to feel like trying to cross the Berlin Wall. The United States of America. The only difference is none of the women crossing the Berlin Wall were worth frisking.